Hey, everybody. This is David Bloom with Next TMT. I'm joined by my colleague and co-founder, Daniel Frankel, here to talk about a wide variety of things under the sun having to do something with technology, media, and telecom. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about the Trade Desk's very rough quarter, the immediate prospects for Paramount Skydance under its brand new owner, including the rather sanguine response that David Ellison had for that scorching South Park episode. Roku says howdy. Warner Brothers Discovery's incredible shrinking cable networks. The Murdochs come looking for an LA outpost. And John Stankey's stinky memo to AT&T employees. So, been quite a week. Lots of earnings this week. Lots going on. And out of all of that, I mean, we didn't even get into that much. Some of the things coming out of the ESPN app announcement, which we could talk about some here, and what Fox One has planned in just about 2 weeks and where things are going. So how you doing, Dan?
I'm good. Couldn't be less excited about Fox One. And I don't think that's a me thing. I think listening to Murdoch talk about it's not going to be anything. We're not spending any money on it. We're not.
Oh, right. I mean, talk about minimizing expectations like top to bottom. Wow. I mean, it's like, we're not gonna do anything original. We're only gonna bring together the stuff we already have. We're not gonna try to hurt in any way our existing cable and broadcast operations. But you can pay $20 still and get all this stuff if you're just not hooked up to this whole weird cable thing. Who does that? Just stream it, baby, for $20.
Yeah, there's a net for a certain demographic that is a Fox viewer, but they feel like not watching right now. You know, maybe it's a Tubi viewer that's like a Gen Z that, you know, wants to watch Fox News or something. But it's sort of like a narrow lintel they're trying to slice there, it seems like.
Well, I mean, to me, it is two things. It is folks who want Fox News wherever they are and folks who want NFL games wherever they are. Right. And to me, because there's really nothing coming from the broadcast side. I mean, it's like The Masked Singer and some procedurals, which have an audience, a steady audience, but they're not doing a whole lot of entertainment stuff. I mean, so
season 50,
and I was remiss in not saying also Big Ten football. So there's that. First pick on the Big Ten games. So all your 9 a.m. on the West Coast USC football games, you'll be watching on Fox One.
Still adjusting, still getting used to that. As a West Coast college football.
And you're not even trying to play football. You're just trying to watch it. Can you imagine these players? They schlepp to, I don't know, Maryland or Rutgers or something, or Penn State. And it's a noon game. It's a big noon game. That's going to be rough, I think.
As a person who coached the California athletes for a while, not collegiate, but otherwise, anything before 12 p.m. is challenging.
I was thinking 4 p.m., but okay.
You
know where off you speak.
They start to wake up. So I thought your analysis of David Ellison's big coming out this week was pretty interesting. I read it and I compared it to the way Paramount is organized right now. He said we're reorganized it around streaming, studios, and linear networks. And I couldn't figure out how is that different. And I brought you in. You understand the business a little better. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, again, those three magic letters, N, F, and L, and also the high level college sports. They've got some college sports, Pac-12, and I think they've got second pick, I think, on the Big Ten games. I believe that's right. They've got the reconstituted Pac-12 this year. They've got March Madness and some of those kinds of things. So they've got some sports rights, the Masters, but the NFL game is there. The really important thing, you know, you looked at how are they going to get $2 billion in savings? But there are some big, obvious, you know, low-hanging apples and pears just sitting there. And the one he talked about was they're actually technically running three separate streaming networks, which is BET Plus, Paramount Plus, and Pluto.
Right.
And on three different tech stacks, completely different tech stacks. So you got to have three teams developing these things on different clouds, which affects a whole bunch of stuff. So you can't do anything. And I'm sure Tom Ryan, who ran streaming as you pointed out, you know, they did a good job. Their last quarter was up 15%. I mean, they've been doing a lot in the middle of all the chaos. But I'm sure he's going, we'd really like to fix this, but boy, we're trying to sell BET. Maybe we'll sell it. Maybe we won't. Do we want to invest in that? Or maybe we'll spin it out, or who knows, because it's Friday and things have changed. And then it was, more than a year of back and forth over Ellison buying the thing. And is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? So you don't want to be doing anything in the middle of that. You're trying to make your numbers look as good as possible by saving money. So you're not making a big venture. So this is an opportunity. I don't think it's $2 billion worth. There's going to be a lot of synergies that are actually people's real jobs. And that's going to suck in a Hollywood that's already pretty beat up. But flip side, Ellison's been making movies in Hollywood with Paramount and other partners for quite a while, quite successful movies, not just with Tom Cruise. And they're committed to a slate within a couple of years of up to 15 pictures. And I got to tell you, when I worked for MGM 20 odd years ago, that would have been a big slate for Paramount then. Paramount has been shorting their movie side, a whole bunch of their potential money operators because of the risk issues for a long time. So if Ellison comes in and Daddy Larry is worth, $250 billion roughly, and he's the ultimate backstop, but he's also got Jerry Cardinale on the hook with Redbird, and Cardinale is one of the biggest media investors in the world, backing you, and you hope to be able to invest smartly, and you see that there's an opportunity. I continue to question it, but I think that there is still an opportunity to do theatrical exhibition at a high end that will drive some franchises that will feed into your streaming networks, feed into your broadcast network. Okay, that's a business. You pick up some
experience that with Top Gun Maverick. I mean, they had a moment. That wasn't that long ago, 3 years ago.
You see, you can only do one Top Gun Maverick because the next one every 30 years. And at that point, Tom Cruise running at 93, he might run pretty well at 93, but for a 93-year-old, not for an action hero. But there's some limits on that kind of resurrection, and I use that word very carefully with Tom.
Resurrection. We've talked about this before, but because it's really relevant now because it actually happened. What does Cindy Holland have that Tom Ryan doesn't? Why would you go to a veteran Netflix executive that left that platform 5 years ago?
Well, she's more of a programmer. That was her background. I mean, the tech side was handled by Greg Peters and his people back in the day, and she was the Bella Bajaria of her era. I'm going to guess they're not. I mean, Ryan was a good operator. No one talked about Tom, though, as a guy who's developing original content. And my guess is they're going to figure out somebody who can develop streaming content on.
She has no relationship. She's more.
Because she spent 12 years, something like that, running the originals side for Netflix as it was coming up. I don't think it was 12 years, but it was a significant number of years, had very good relationships, was very well liked. And then Netflix does what Netflix does. It's like, oh, we're bigger now, and you're not big enough for the bigger thing in many more countries that we need. So thanks for your service. Here's a very nice going away present. Better than anything Derek Jeter gave his girlfriends. And off you go. And she's been doing different stuff. I think she's more than capable of taking some of their properties and stuff that they've got laying around and making some interesting stuff. So maybe some interesting stuff with Star Trek, making sure they take care of Taylor Sheridan, because that's really, really important. Making sure they take care of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, because that's really important.
Tom Ryan, and I mean, that's an important relationship that he nurtured and built into a powerhouse.
Did he do that?
I don't know. I mean,
Tom, my recollection of Tom is his background is in home entertainment, which is
built Pluto TV. That was his
distribution in television, which is really important, but not the talent side. And I don't want to diminish him because, again, he worked with a very difficult hand and managed to pull in more than a few pots of quite substantial size. But I never heard about him as a show creator, programmer, that kind of guy.
So Jeff Shell, he's got a big job at Comcast before kind of a public scandal. CEO.
Yeah, before he stepped in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And how does he fit into all this? What do you think of him?
Well, he's been with a big company that has a big news organization, that has a big entertainment organization and sports. I think he's been around those operations before. So I don't think any of this stuff is going to be new for him. I mean, I think that's the appeal. And it's not like this is the first guy who ever worked at one studio, maybe got in trouble for one thing or another. Shocking, it might involve inappropriate behavior around people of another gender. Who saw that coming? But then lands somewhere else and does just fine, perhaps somewhat chastened and more focused on the matter at hand.
Speaking of news, I was shocked to learn from News Corp that Los Angeles, the Southern California region, is their second biggest market for the New York Post.
No, it's the second biggest market, period. So just on a numbers basis.
I didn't think you read. I mean, I just assumed that.
Yeah. Well, and think how many people used to live in New York, including my spouse, who now live here. And the Post was always this goofy, kind of guilty pleasure. Page 6. Now they'll need page 7, page 8, page 9, because they'll have even more gossip, because they'll have more people on the ground.
I thought celebrity cancel culture was dead. I thought that was all. They killed E! News. That was the big.
Yeah, but that's a minor cable network, as opposed to the thousands of people on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram who talk about Hollywood every single frickin' day, have big followings, and are effectively the successors to E! News minus the distribution headaches. So there's plenty of stuff out there. And if you've got your people on the ground, maybe you break some news and give it a reason to exist. I feel like the Post's sort of defiantly blue collar, conservative, hey, I work on the docks kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Which fits a very specific but substantial audience in New York. Not enough to make the Post make money, I want to add, but a substantial audience. I don't know that audience is sitting out here, though. We've got a bigger harbor here in LA and Long Beach, and we've got lots of blue collar folks working in manufacturing in lots of places.
Oh, a lot of them are being deported right now, but that's true. A weird time. It's culturally, News Corp coming to woke Hollywood feels a little strange, but I read in the New York Times this week, we're not so woke after all.
Well, it's a big place with a lot of people. I mean, you go out, look, we got a cabin out in the mountains of Riverside County, trust me, and that's where I started my California journalism business. There's a lot of folks out there that they're pretty red state. That's who they are. I mean, Central Valley, Bakersfield, that's where a lot of pretty conservative folks come from.
Taking the 5 to Berkeley on Wednesday, and can't wait to see those signs about Newsom and water rights. And
the water rights thing is its own deal, because they're mad at the feds too, and now they get to be mad at Trump for the water rights as opposed to just Newsom. The water rights are actually driven more by the feds than the state, but the state does have a significant impact. I wrote about water rights when I worked for Riverside too, so trust me, that's a very old story, and pissed off farmers in the Central Valley who've been extracting water to feed us and good parts of the rest of the world have also been extracting more than the thing will bear, and doing things like having almond orchards or alfalfa fields that use extraordinary amounts of water for relatively low value crops. A lot of the almonds have been sent to China, for instance. Well, is that the best use of a scarce and not easily renewable resource in groundwater in the Central Valley? And we're finding out, not so much. So that being said, lots of conservative folks, Riverside County, San Bernardino County, you get outside of the big city and it gets a little bit redder by far. And we'll see how that plays out.
The Los Angeles Times has just seeded its market. It doesn't seem like, they kind of pivoted. Supposedly the owner of the medical technologist billionaire got infatuated, mega curious, they said. And he toned down his opinion section famously in November. Mario Galarza, the opinion editor, left in a huff. It was a big story. Never seemed like they followed through. They don't have any kind of brand identity. They're just sort of a stripped down, less dilapidated newspaper, it seems like.
I got to say, I've been competing with the LA Times for a very long time, and I never cared about their editorial page or their op-ed pages. They never, and I know there were a few columnists who had built some sort of following, but for years, decades, they never punched through. They had great writers in their news side. They had Pulitzer Prize winning talent up and down back in the heyday in the 70s and 80s and even in the 80s. They still, he laid out hired up hundreds of journalists after he bought the paper to try to get things going again. It's difficult to finance a large organization like that attempts to be an omnibus source of information about Southern California. As big as it is, as diverse as it is, as spread out as it is, as much stuff is going on, that's hard to finance without losing a lot of money. And I suspect what will happen is Rupert will find that out too. And then the real question becomes, just as with the New York Post, does the California Post survive Rupert?
Yeah, at least you're making a national play. I don't really, or you're bolstering your national play. I don't really get it, but we'll see.
Yeah. I'm not holding my breath.
As we anticipated, broadcast station consolidation accelerated again this week. Gray bought 10 TV stations from Byron Allen. And
as Byron Allen's billion-dollar empire continues to shrink to 38 cents.
Yeah, those big, what was going to buy, he was going to buy Paramount at one point. And, he was for a while kind of the big player, but it never felt serious. And now he's kind of on the ropes, it looks like.
It did feel like a little bit of that Texas line of big hat, no cattle. Charming guy, good on a stage, tells a good story. I kept waiting for it. It's like, okay, so you bought the Weather Channel, and he rightly said, if I'd known how popular weather was, I would have bought it sooner. Totally understand that. But then you get like, hey, where do you go from here, right? So
I was tickled pink, a psychotic that we dealt with. I will get into it. But he did post a funny LinkedIn post about 2 years ago. It was a collage of Byron Allen cover issues for Broadcasting Cable, my former employer, which I left about a year ago when it dissolved. There were like 6 of them lined up, and they all occurred in the last 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of a shameless self-promoter, would go every B2B conference you go to. He would tell us Horatio Alger story, rags to riches. And it is compelling story of a hustler.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he had a good story. Again, charming, personable guy, great on a stage. Oh, there eventually was some questions about whether there is. It's like, to some extent, he jumped on some stuff that really wasn't well positioned for long-term growth. And I think that's probably what caught him, because you've really got to keep throwing that cash off to keep paying off the debt to allow you to get ahead. Right. And as we see with Warner Brothers, I mean, they're spinning off their cable networks probably just in the nick of time. But boy, without the NBA this fall, like, who's watching TNT or Bleacher Sports or whatever?
Well, they've got Banana Ball.
Yeah, well, you've already decided Banana Ball is bananas. Banana Ball is like really fun. It's a little bit like you go and watch that hour-long comedy special, and it's great. But are you going to watch it like every week, the same special?
No, there's an era of desperation. They acquired sub-licensing from ESPN. They acquired some college football playoff games.
Yeah, some of the early round playoff games. They got a couple of those. Some of that was a payoff, if you recall, over the venue lawsuit settlement. So right. They're going to continue to do the NBA show with Sir Charles and Ernie and Shaq and
right.
What's his name? The Jet, Kenny. They're going to continue to produce that. It'll run on ESPN, the app, and ESPN's coverage. And there's some talk that maybe it'll be relatively short on ESPN, and they'll have like an after show that they'll run. Well, that might work. I don't know what kind of audience that is. And probably what you want to do is turn that into like a podcast, right? You want to hear more like Bill Maher does. Bill Maher has an after show that he does his show, and then he says, tune in on YouTube for our live after show.
You mentioned Bill Maher. We'll get to him in a second. Now, the point I was going to make is it seems like it's difficult just to pick up a couple of college football games, and now you got to ramp up, expertise in that. Covering football is very different than covering pro basketball. So I just wonder how that.
Well, yeah, you're right. To some extent, it's not just the guys you have or women that are doing the play-by-play. To some extent, it's the crews and knowing how to capture a different set of just the right shots live as they're happening. And it's a whole lot more difficult on a football field with all of the football field entails than on the more confined setting of a basketball arena.
So Warner Brothers Discovery, I was looking at their kind of rate of burn for the linear networks. It seems a lot higher than the other ones. Is that a mirage, or am I right about that?
Well, what's going to make you go watch TNT, TBS, those guys? Not that much. CNN is still in free fall on the cable side. Mark Thompson's plan is to be more digitally focused, just blow off this whole TV thing and be more of a digital presence, where they've been good for a very long time. I don't know what that money looks like. They dropped that, $80 million a year ago. He told at the staff on a staff meeting. They put 80 million into a new digital focused site. Good. That's smart investment, I think. But whatever you have left of your vestigial cable operation is still far and away number 3. And what's left of the ratings of cable among the big 3 24-hour news channels, right? So you're not bringing in lots of extra dough off of that. So maybe you're pulling it off the digital presence. So CNN isn't doing it. TNT's not going to have sports that people care about. So you're not going to have tune in off of that. How many times can you watch good movies that belong in many cases to another studio, like another Star Wars movie that you can also watch on on Disney Plus? I don't see that being a big winner. And the real issue is you got declining viewership. You've got no leverage when it comes to re-upping on the retrans agreements. And your advertisers are like, what am I paying for?
Speaking of Turner, it was interesting. The Hollywood Reporter excerpted the first chapter of John Malone's new book, Born to be Wired. So Simon & Schuster.
That is only about 10% of the title, by the way. The entire title in that book, which is like that old Fiona Apple album that goes on for like 87 words. I mean, it is like the first chapter is basically the title of the book. I mean, it goes on and on and on and kind of wraps around the back of the.
Mark Robichaux, you could cover him at the Wall Street Journal, edited. I assume that means he ghost wrote it. It's interesting. In the first chapter, he talks about his sort of legendary relationships, and he was really close to Ted Turner, and talks about
like Ted Turner, a gigantic landowner, and maybe one of the 2 or 3 biggest.
He talks about Ted Turner's sort of unfortunate progressive turn with James Fonda, and that the sort of associated turn leftward of CNN, and Ted Turner did influence him to become more environmentally conscious and respectful of the land, and also made him sort of understand the positive power of philanthropy, which it's a nice thing. You start thinking, well, gee, what has John Malone done to make the world cleaner and more breathable? And then he starts talking about his close relationship with Rupert Murdoch, and you're like, this isn't so coherent.
Well, we can expect a relationship with Rupert. But in Malone's defense, and I don't often do that, I will freely admit, I recently read a piece where he, as this gigantic landowner, put aside into a farming easement or an agriculture easement, like 25,000 acres, part of an effort with a lot of other landowners in one of the western states to preserve a set of land that from being developed. When it's in these easements, these perpetual easements, it cannot be turned into anything other than agricultural uses.
Well, and that Simon & Schuster title, I went on Amazon and ordered it. So maybe they get into that. I don't know. I just read the first chapter.
Yeah, right. Well, he's an interesting guy. You look at some of the weird structures of the spinoff that Warner Brothers is doing, and that is almost certainly driven by the reduced tax exposure mantra that Malone has drilled into his people.
Also interesting to me is these cable titans. And I shouldn't say this. We're going to be at SCT Cable Tech Expo in about a month and a half.
Just crawling with titans, by the way. There's titans everywhere.
But they're the most self-congratulatory business of all time. We festoon the country from mountains to deserts with cables. These brave cable cowboys, these mavericks. It's just like, okay, well, I mean, how about phones, electricity? I mean, this has happened before. Industries have laid wires across the country, across oceans. It's not great. But the relentless self-celebration gets a little old from the cable industry. I don't know.
Sure. If you really want to read an entertaining article about true pioneers, I suggest it's about a 20-year-old article now in Wired magazine by Neil Stephenson, the great, if incredibly loquacious science fiction writer. But it's a science fact book. Or not book, but piece, about 10,000 words, so it's huge, about laying the international undersea cables that have connected the world and the internet, going back to the 1870s when they were ships with big vats of tar, and they would coat the cable with this this tar as they're laying and unspooling it underneath the ocean. I mean, it's extraordinary. Really,
we've gotten better at that, I guess, right?
Well, a little fancier, yeah. I mean, the boats are no longer steam powered, but just it makes you remember. Oh my God, Queen Victoria and I want to say it was Abe Lincoln, but I don't think that's true, were able to communicate by telegraph because they had laid a line across the Atlantic Ocean at a time when that was a really prodigious thing. And I think that
That's
we
pretty
take
cool.
all of that stuff really for granted. Settling the West, the telegraph had as much to do with that. All of a sudden, people in Washington, D.C. could hear about news on the West Coast within minutes
I try to
after it.
think of the stagecoach when I have flight delays. It's a good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty extraordinary history. So
You're,
what, that's
you're
not to diminish what John Malone did in helping, and all those other guys in helping wire, particularly in the West where they couldn't get a good TV signal. But it's like,
I mean,
dude,
he's the architect of the modern backbone of how we communicate. I'm not going to,
media communications, telecom, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
yeah, starting with, anyway, you mentioned Wired Magazine, and they had a scoop this week that the big large language model titans, OpenAI and Anthropic, are in the middle of AI war. Anthropic banned OpenAI from using Claude, its LLM, because OpenAI was allegedly using it for comparative analysis of GPT-5, its current iteration of its LLM. Kind of an interesting, I don't remember the story being a big deal a year ago. It's really happening fast. The topic of LLMs was just being introduced about 365 days ago to sort of the mainstream
No,
public.
it's been about 2 years since ChatGPT 3.0 hit, 2.5 years now. And actually, this week, GPT-5 finally came out 2 years after GPT-4 came out. So it felt like it was a long time, but they put out a whole bunch of like little submodels and variants and all that of the 4.0 model, which was a big step from GPT-3, which made everybody go, holy crap, this thing might be big. GPT-5 came out this week, and that's part of what Wired was reporting about. They were doing comps against Claude. And I mean, after it came out, everybody else was doing comps against Claude and Grok and all the rest, all the journalists and stuff. And generally the comparisons, and these are all a little bit artificial, so you try to do an apples to apples thing. They get to be a little artificial, but generally GPT-5 a little bit better on most things, not better than a few things. What I thought was interesting is instead of having all these different little submodels, they just have one. So they brought back 4.0 because some people are like, oh, I miss 4.0. And it's like, okay, so they brought that back. But they have a kind of a traffic cop, a program that sits on top. You make your little query and it says, okay, this is better for this model. It'll file things around and put it to the part of the GPT beast, 5 beast, that's best situated to handle that. So that's an interesting step.
I've heard folks, little reporters complain about it. I have experienced it. And when a grumpy, high-profile analyst, I won't name, posted on social this morning about how fraught with factual errors GPT-5 can be.
Yeah, Rayburn's good that way. Dan Rayburn's. He's definitely, he cuts the swath. Yeah. So a useful reminder, all this shit gets stuff wrong sometimes. I had a couple of things just recently where I, in my limited intelligence, managed to catch a version of GPT being wrong. These were visual lookup things. So one was a visual lookup of some peppers that a neighbor had in a box that said free, and just like those Trojans.
Well, I can tell you,
a couple thousand years ago, check the inside before you take it in.
You were a champ. You made it through that entire podcast you were beat red and sweating the whole time. But
oh my God, yes. Yeah, because I got a little bit like here on my face, and my hands were burning. I mean, my fingers were burning because I had taken the insides out. And, it's basically, chemical warfare by plants. So there's habaneros, the ChatGPT lookup function said, well, those are agi dulce, which are the sweet version, which they freely admit are nearly identical. But this is definitely test and verify. So I made it was a delicious pasta sauce, but it was somewhere around Texas chili level 6.
Yeah, the levels of that thing.
Yeah. You go into like a serious, like there's a great traditional Thai restaurant on Westwood Boulevard just south of UCLA. I met my son there for lunch, and they've got like a 10-point scale of hot. And like 5 usually breaks white people, just breaks them, But I'm okay with that. I said, oh, let's just do the 5. She's like, how you doing? The waitress, how you doing? It's like, pretty good. It's warm. So I'm pretty good, right? And my son is like apparently going to have
a restaurant a couple of weeks ago with friends. They said, how do you want it? Spicy, kind of spicy, moderate spicy, kind of spicy. And they looked at me, yeah, sure. You can open something called some exposure to habaneros, and I'm including a Long Island, I think it's called red pepper.
Long Island, I'm not familiar with that one, but okay.
It's going on the pizza I'm making tonight, so we'll see how that goes.
Okay, this might be some Long Island version of a Calabrian pepper or something like that, given all the Italians, immigrants that live in the area. But the other one that was wrong, and I'll just throw this out there, was I'm in the donut shop picking up a bran muffin for my spouse. I look across the street, there's a car carrier that I think the driver is actually in this donut shop as well, because it's early in the morning. And they've got an older classic Rolls Royce on there and another funky looking, cool, rare car. I couldn't tell what it was. So I said, well, tell me what these cars are. So the one's a Silver Shadow from like 2003. So that's a vintage car with a lot of money. And the other one's also like a 20-odd-year-old car. And it said it was like a Mazda or something like that. And I go, are you sure? Look at that grill. And he goes, you know what? You're right. That's a BMW. It's a special version of the Z3. Da, da, da. You're correct. Good eye, And the other good news about the new GPT-5 is they're going to take away, or they're going to give you the option of the kind of attitude it has when it answers your questions. So both Mark Maron and Bill Maher have grumps, and we include in the newsletter this week Bill Maher's little take at the end of his show on Friday night about these overly upbeat damn AI things because they make them happy. Well, you can imagine that Mark Maron and Bill Maher do not want happy bots. They do not want happy. And a lot of us are like, okay, knock it off. But it's good for engagement for others. It can be problematic if you're.
It reminds me of that scene Matthew McConaughey in Interstellar, where at the end he makes friends with the robot and he modulates his sense of humor.
Yes, yeah, or Jarvis in Iron Man, I think.
Speaking of movies, you called one out for your Paramount discussion. Which one was that again?
Well, David Faber at CNBC had asked David Ellison about that scorching South Park episode and what his friends in the Trump administration thought about it, because they had some complaints. And he's like, well, let me just say, I think it's safe to say over 27 seasons that Matt and Trey have proven to be equal opportunity offenders. It's like, well, that's a very good line.
Yeah, they had like an entire episode entitled Hillary Clinton's hooch. I mean, it's not
right. And the reality is, who's in power now and perhaps wildly abusing it? You can say the other guys did it when they were in charge. Fine, whatever. Went too far. Fine. They helped set the pendulum swing the other direction. Now that is very mockable, and these guys are doing it over there. And these guys like Cartman, the character, the would-be conservative poseur kid in South Park, is really unhappy to see like all his shtick being taken over by others.
I did watch episode 2, and I'll remind everyone we're only on episode 2. The administration, Kristi Noem seems to have, she chimed up and barked back this week. But they've been kind of
well, she didn't bark back because she shot all the dogs. But I just want to point out that was perhaps the absolute wrong verb to use. But that being said,
no pun intended. But
I mean, one of the ongoing shticks, her face melts, and of course her complaint was all they do is just talk about people's look. They don't have, it's nothing original about it. I was like, well, and your qualifications as a crappy governor of a tiny state in the Northern Plains qualified you to run immigration and customs enforcement. How? You're just
so ready with the social retort too. I mean, soon does anything happen that they're right back with something clever.
Right. So all she's doing is feeding the beast, and they're like, "Thank you. This is episode 3," because they write these things every freaking week somehow.
Stephen Miller. That episode will be interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, I think what you were asking, because that was prefaced into The Penguin Lessons, a fine little movie that Netflix notes is one of its most liked movies. It's a small film set in Argentina in 1976, based on a memoir of an Englishman who came to Argentina to teach at a private school. His life a bit of a mess after the death of his child from a drunk driver and the dissolution of his marriage. So instead of it just being a Hollywood trope, it's actually this shit actually happened to him, and it's terrible. So he shows up there, played by Steve Coogan, one of my favorites, and Coogan gets there just about in time for the coup, the military coup that led to the murders of tens of thousands of leftists, intellectuals, schmucks in the wrong place at the wrong time, et cetera, et cetera. The film ends, and I know this is a fact that I've seen in other places, some 30,000 desaparecidos remain missing. The disappeared, that's what that means in Spanish, remain missing. And you can't help but feel a little uncomfortable about the echoes of scenes of people being picked up by guys off the street and whisked away and never seen again, given what's going on now. And so it becomes this subtle thing. Sony Pictures Classics did the film. It is terrific, and it's mostly really about this penguin that basically adopts Coogan's character and then helps transform the school during that year. But against this setting that's kind of bone-chilling, it's like, this is feeling a little too familiar for comfort.
Penguins, bone-chilling. It's epidemic.
Yes, the icy stare of the penguin.
So I'll just...
Did you notice that pun?
I did. I tried to move us on. But anyway,
I'm not going to let that one just sit there like a dead fish.
We had a Roku TCL TV die, which doesn't... it's like my favorite... one of my favorite creators is this guy from Georgia. He owns Royal Car Repairers, I forgot what it's called. But anyway, they're like a tight crew that fixes cars all day. The guy's son... started a YouTube business where they just talk about cars all day.
It's like Click and Clack used to be back in the day on cars. Fantastic. On public radio.
I own two Hyundais, and these guys hate Hyundais, so I'm really tuned in. They're showmen, and it just shows you how you can augment a business and turn it into a media business now. If you
oh yeah
the right. Anyway, I try to moderate my usage of YouTube over the last year. I watched a lot of TV on my computer, and because we didn't have that TV. I replaced it recently with the Google TV powered Hisense, which will probably break the same.
But do you know what broke it? Because there's not a lot of moving parts on a modern TV these days. You usually just get fans. You want just like a better screen or something.
It's backlighting. It's $300 for the TV. Probably cost it $300 to fix it. Anyway, my point is, with Google TV, it's interesting to me about how sticky. Wow, the fourth quarter of the 2000 Lakers comeback against Portland in Game 7 of the conference finals. Best scenes from The Sopranos, Breaking Bad scenes, Mad Men scenes. Like it's clouded tapped into my cerebral cortex. Sticky as hell. I didn't experience that with other operating systems. And then I read in Lopez, Jenko Royker's newsletter, that Google TV is not on the ropes, but suddenly struggling. It's hard to monetize and having some problems. And I kind of think this is just outsider's opinion. As long as YouTube thrives in connected TV, why would you disrupt that synergy? Anyway,
it's an interesting question because this is a little bit like the same thing we want to ask Amazon or Apple, right? Okay, you've got these hardware things that are really not the thing that's high margin and makes you a crap ton of money. But the hardware can be the gateway into the thing that makes you a crap ton of money. So makes stuff. Apple's still going to make like the Apple TV is far and away the most expensive little puck out there. But Amazon Fire devices, dirt cheap. I think Walmart's going to do this with Vizio. They're turning it into a private label brand. You know, it was a leading low-end maker of pretty good sets. I mean, pretty good TVs. But you look at all that and you go, okay, so the margins are nothing. Where do you cut corners? What does that business look like? And does it matter when Google had another great quarter? Look, they had another extraordinary quarter.
Just making software. And I don't see why you wouldn't want to make software that supports the massive growth engine that YouTube is.
Right. So I guess the question is, what's it cost versus the audience you get? How does that feed into your bigger engine? I mean, I think a lot of the analyst numbers I see, they try to piece out what YouTube would be if it was a separate business. 20 billion a year in revenue. You tried to sell that or spin that off, it might be $100 billion business. You know, like usually it's a 4 to 5x on sale price. It is the biggest thing in streaming, period, in terms of audience. And it is a cash generation machine. So like anything else, it's like, oh, we're having a hard time monetizing it. Does it matter? How does this feed into your big thing? Is it just like it's like just another piece, right? I think that's the question. Same thing with Apple Apple's numbers, they had a great quarter. And the thing that made everything great for them, though, wasn't their great quarter in all the ways that they usually have a great quarter. It was the hunk of glass, etched Corningware glass that they gave to Trump. And then all of a sudden the market price went up $30 a share. But along the way, they announced that once again, their services unit had another record quarter. It was like 27.4 billion or something like that. It's got an annual run rate now of 108 billion, which is roughly 10 times the size of Fox in terms of revenues. It is 2.5 times the size of Warner Brothers and Netflix in annual revenues.
Yeah, the market cap.
It is huge, right?
It's funny, we're at the end of Q2 rating season. I think we're done. And I always get tickled at something that Rich Greenfield, the analyst, always complains about. All these guys, you know, the great quarter. You know, when it's time, their time of the queue.
They have like a word salad. They track the words that are used, like it's a word bingo thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
buzzword. Yeah.
All right. Well, a good Sunday podcast journey, Dave. Thanks for hopping on the computer with me.
Yeah, it's good. Lots going on. You know, it's like early August. What are all these people doing? Why aren't they like hanging at the beach on Cape Cod or Montauk or San Luis Obispo or something? It's like, what's going on?
Well,
they're all like boarding things.
Celebrity death in Montauk. A fashion designer dropped dead on a boat.
Oh, right. An English, really beautiful bikini seller. Is that right?
And I'm reminded of a certain original series on Showtime called The Affair that took place in Montauk. It was partially set there.
I'm not reminded by that at all. But hey, you know, whatever's left of you as you look at your highlights from shows that have been off the air for 20 years, as opposed to actual shows that maybe are on now. I don't know, the Penguin Lessons. Go with God. Go with God. Go watch some highlights. I mean, you're like your kids. I could tell you, like, they just want to watch highlights of baseball. You want to watch highlights of The Sopranos. I don't know what to say.
We'll have a week to figure it out. Same time, same place. See you next Sunday.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.